Welcome to Dear Business Coach, the podcast. My name's Elizabeth. Find one thing to move your business forward today with conversations, spotlights, interviews, articles, and free resources. Listen and follow and subscribe on social media. Dear Business Coach pages and groups. Dear Business Coach podcast. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and don't forget Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, anywhere you listen to podcasts. All it takes sometimes is one little thing to move your business forward today. Hugh, welcome to the Dear Business Coach podcast. How are you today?
I am doing great. How are you, Elizabeth? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, just great. This is really exciting. Thank you. I'm pleasured to have you here, honored to have you here. I know a little bit about you, and normally what I would do, right, is I have a profile printed out in front of me, like an about section, and I know I can read that here, but actually, I met you last week at the Power of Laughter Masterclass with Clayton Fletcher, and I know that you were sharing with me. You have some stories to share, and you are quite something in the business world, but I don't actually even know what your title is. Do you like to go by a title, or how do you introduce yourself?
Well, there was a day that titles meant a lot to me, and I right now I have a couple of different titles. One of them is I'm the president and CEO of Hornsby Business Consulting, um, which is a company that is based around sales and mindset. But my biggest thing, and then I'm the vice president of sales for a company called Everflow Supplies out of New Jersey. I'm transitioning out of that role into the consulting world, but I am consulting with them as well, so it's exciting with that. I've been in the plumbing industry for many years. I started with a company called Ferguson Enterprises out of Newport News, and what I found as I moved through, well, what's happened with me is at the age of 10, I hit my head and I was diagnosed as an epileptic. So I am a proud epileptic today. But what that taught me, and my mother taught me, was that when we were in the hospital, they came in and they told me that I was an epileptic. I had no idea what that even meant. In fact, I thought it was leprosy. But when we were in the car, she had a tear in her eye and she looked at me and I said, "Mom, it's going to be okay." Now I'm
Mm.
10 years old. And she says, "I know it's going to be okay, but not everybody else is going to understand what epilepsy really means." And it was that day I started mentoring and coaching and helping others. And what really happened um, after that, and I didn't even realize till I was like, um, she was in hospice and we were talking, is that she would put these underdog books on my bed on a regular basis. And what she was doing, she was changing my mindset, where a lot of people uh, would not have had that type of gift. I did. And I realized that, that people were trying to hold me back and label me. And I realized there were so many other people out there that I could help. So I took that and I started mentoring and coaching at a pretty early age. In the ninth grade, they tried to send me to special needs. They didn't call it special needs back then, but that was another, uh, pivotal moment, uh, because I remember going home and having that conversation with my mother, and she looked at me and she said, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And I said, "Well, I'm not going to special needs." She said, "Well, go upstairs, write down what it is that you want, and then bring it back down and let's talk about it." Um, and so, my life, um, I struggled in school, I struggled in high school. I ended up going to Ferrum Junior College and then Radford University, where I started a fraternity. And I started a fraternity based on um, I had I had moved into that to Radford, and I started talking to fraternities, and they told me I couldn't be president, so I started my own. And what was amazing is I took those core values that I had learned and I went and you know, made some cards up and I started knocking on doors. And basically what it was is that I made a decision that I didn't want to have a fraternity that had labels on it. I wanted all different types of people to be involved. And also knew I was only going to be there for a couple of years. So the big thing I talked to people about was, hey, listen, I'm only going to be here a couple of years. Let's figure out where you want to go. And this was the beginning of my business model that I have built today. And it was bringing people in, figuring out where it is they want to go, getting them to create a team environment, and then building something out that was really special. In 1 year, we were twice the size of any other fraternity on campus. And it was a pretty amazing thing. But the amazing thing was the people. They got so involved, and we got so involved in what we were trying to do and how we were giving back to the community, um, that I made a decision to start the Greek Week games over at Radford University. And what I wanted to do there was how do you include the student body with the Greeks? And I've got pictures on LinkedIn of me on a tricycle. It was pretty neat, and I was able to do that. But what I really learned going through was that um, failure is not failure. It's only failure if you stop. And so my first couple sales jobs, if I was supposed to go left, I went right. I got fired
Hmm.
on one of them, and but it was and it really wasn't fair on his part. But what I realized there, Elizabeth, was it was the day that I took personal responsibility for myself that made the difference. And even though there were things that, I could have challenged and everything else, I had to take that responsibility and say, yeah, what he did was not right, but but I was really bad. So, so I took that responsibility. Since that time, I've turned around and built up over 10 companies, all based on people. So I have what you call the people-based business movement. Um, and it's where I was at an association meeting, um, and I remember I was on the board, and they got to me, and all these old guys, which they were, you know, probably younger than me, but they were really acting old, and they said, "We just can't get people to come into our industry." And when they got to me, I said, "Well, are we having, are we looking for people in all the wrong places, and are we having the wrong conversations?"
Are you a LinkedIn user? If you are, you can join me for LinkedIn Live Audio with Elizabeth every week, usually on Mondays at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. I will have a LinkedIn Live Audio where we talk about podcasting for executives who speak and podcasting for team leaders who speak. These are the themes that are currently running. If that sounds like something you're interested, visit me, Elizabeth Walker at Work, on my LinkedIn profile.
I said, if we want to get people to come into our industry, then we need to change the narrative. So I got really active with that and changing the narrative. And um, I ended up at a company with New Jersey that was from New Jersey, New York. He was a Hasidic Jewish guy, um, and really bright, but really, was having a difficult time taking his company across the United States. And he came to me and he said, do you think you can do this? And I said, well, I'm probably the only person I know that knows how to exactly do that. And he gave me the keys to the car, and I went out and I started hiring people. I hired them off lawnmowers. I hired finished carpenters. I did not care. I hire people with potential. And I'm a big think and grow rich person. The burning desire side of it was big, but there was a lot of people that had burning desire once in their life, but felt like that they had just been held back. And I started finding those people, and I started putting it together. I have a 7-step process that I put people through. It's pretty amazing, and it's not just about teaching people how to sell, but it's about teaching people about what are your dreams. and where is it that you want to go? Because what I realized is that 98% of the companies that are out there are all just about the numbers. You know, they
Mhm.
just, if you don't hit the numbers, you're not good. If you know, and they want to throw salespeople catalogs and see if they stick. And if they don't stick, you just keep flipping them back and forth. Um, what I realized is that if I could figure out where these people wanted to go, and in many cases, they didn't know what they wanted. So I helped them start to really go do a deep dive to figure out what their wants were. And then we would put goals and we would put life scripts together
Well,
for them. And then, but my big thing with them, for them to be able to get to a position where I would hire them, is that number one is I would hire them on potential, and they would have to show me that they were really wanted to be a part of something bigger than themselves. So what I was able to do with this group is that we kind of played the underdog role. You know, we were a company that nobody even knew who we were hardly. In fact, the ones that did know who we were, they had not treated them the way that they needed to be. But we started building that role and was like, first of all, the biggest thing you're doing right now is building your brand. And because you're building your brand, you're building the company's brand. But then the other thing I did is I tied it into the industry. And I said, this industry is such a great place. Just remember, this is bigger. This is much bigger than you and much bigger than us. And what we were able to do in in a year and a half, we took that company from 65 million to 155 million in a year and a half. It was amazing. And a lot of people give me the credit for that. At the end of the day, I was the facilitator. I call it facilitating the traffic.
mhm.
I'm a big type coach, and I worked with each person as much as I could, and then we would have team meetings. When COVID happened, we were doing it every day, and the team meetings were I would bring in I would we would go through certain specific areas, and then every Wednesday we called it Leadership Wednesdays. And so I started reaching out to people that had books that really resonated with me, and I would bring them in on Wednesdays. And my whole idea was to take some of these people that were, finished carpenters off lawnmowers or whatever else, and get them to start feeling comfortable with, C-level executive type conversations. And my whole thing with these C-level people was not to say, okay, this is where I am today. It was to get them to say, this is how I got started, and these are the things that I needed to do. It was a pretty amazing, it was a pretty amazing journey. Um, because of that, I think we really started to change the industry, the way that we were viewed. And I'm always telling people that the biggest thing that we have to do is well, it starts every morning. Um, it starts every morning, and it starts every evening and morning. I do a gratitude check. I do about 5 minutes of gratitude in the evening, 5 minutes of gratitude in the morning. But what I really teach people more than anything else, because you find people that get stuck, um, is to start looking back deep within their lives and figure out what it is that they have accomplished over time when things get hard, that that they can really revert back to and use that to wherever it is right now they are in life and being stuck, and then look at those times so that you realize that I'm really not stuck. I need to overcome, and I've done this time and time again. So that's a big part of what I teach.
Okay, well, I'm curious to know, you're a natural leader, and that's obvious. And I heard a couple of things over time. You, as a 10-year-old, you felt like you were taking on some coaching and mentorship qualities, and you said you were doing that. And your mom was starting to put some things into your mind. One of the things that stood out for me is that I don't even know if I wrote it down here, but you said that when your school or an administrator or someone had suggested that you be put into, as you say, we didn't call it special needs, but that sort of a switch in classroom. And then she says to you, well, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
That is something else. You don't hear a lot of that kind of uh, psychological positioning from a parent. That sounds like she knew what she was doing. She could have said, she could have said any number of things that would have been encouraging, that would have been supportive. She could have gone to the school herself, and she didn't do that. She asked you as if you had a management solution that you needed to come up with. Do you have any reflections around that?
Yeah, I do, because her story, when she was in hospice, I said, Mom, tell me your story. I mean, it was always about me, and I always felt guilty about that. But she was kind of, and my dad was incredible as well. But she was abandoned at the age of 3 by her mother, and then her father, which is my grandfather, um, you know, sent her to a place. He couldn't take care of her at that time because he was working. And so for 7 years, she lived on a couch, and it was a blended family. And she had people telling her what she could do and what she couldn't do. And all she ever wanted to do was see her mother. Her mother ended up being an alcoholic and had mental issues, and she never got to ever see her again. So she understood what it was like to fight against adversity. Um, and she never really shared that with me, but she lived it. She lived a lot of that through me, because she knew what it felt like to be in a situation that you have a choice. You can either, you know, muddle down into a lower level, or you have a choice to become who it is that you want to become. She was determined, and so is my father. They were both determined for me to look at life differently. Um, and
I'll say.
it's kind of what's brought me here, because it's kind of what, you know, it's how I ended up on a stage in New York City doing comedy on cancer. I mean, 10 years old, I had epilepsy. 15 years ago, 16 years ago, I ran the Boston Marathon. Year after that, I'm having open heart surgery at the Cleveland Clinic. Um, and each one of those taught me to overcome the next. When the teacher tried to send me to whatever the special school was, um, I mean, I walked around with that teacher's name in my head for years, not in a negative. Well, for a while there, it was negative, but it was not really became a positive. That okay, you can overcome. Um, and the same thing, at cancer. A year last December, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Um, and I teach mindset. I coach these people. I had to go back and realize that everything that I've done, that this was probably the biggest challenge that I was going through. Um, and then I had to really get my mindset changed on that. And but what I've done is I've turned around and built up over 10 companies, and it's all based on people, and it's finding people to get the most out of themselves. Um, I believe in creating teams. I'm really I'm really good at that. And I'm the leader that tries to build the team up and then let me participate from the back end. And typically what happens with that, when you do that, it's eventually the team doesn't need you as much. If you're doing the right thing, you're building them to build others up. Um, but it really did all start at the age of 10. And it really all started with a changed mindset, which we just don't, Elizabeth, we don't get that in elementary school. We don't get that in high school. We don't get it in college. We don't, we get so set in our ways because many times we end up living a life that other people tells us that we need to live. You know, my
Mhm.
teacher didn't realize it, but she was telling me, okay, you're not smart enough to go to college. Um, you know, she was saying, you know, we need to put you down at this level. And but it was not just her, and she didn't mean anything by that. She was a very kind person. Um, but if she would have asked questions of me to say, okay, what is it that you want and how can we help you get there? Those situations to me are the most important things that we can do for people. Now, the person that you're asking those questions of have to have a desire to change or improve or whatever that may be. And so I've taken all that, I bundled it together. I was really good at sales, but then I became, you know, a leader in management. And it's so different than the way most people manage. But I manage because I care, but I have high expectations of my team. Um, and I want them to live the life they want to live, but I also want them to live a personal life. I want them to make their life, you know, I want to have a reflection on them the same way that my parents had reflection on me, that when people tell us that we can't do something, that's when we have that opportunity to take that step back and and uh and go figure it out.
Hmm.
And just, I don't know, I get up every morning and I say I love life. I probably say I walk around the house saying I just love life. And I do. And I love people, and I love putting myself around those people. And if I can make another person's life better, then I think that's great. And because of that, the people that I've been surrounded with is pretty phenomenal. I say a rising tide lifts all boats, but you know, my mentor is Don Green of the Napoleon Hill Foundation over in Wise, Virginia. Um, and then my circle of influence are uh, Dave Sanderson. His plane went down in the Hudson. He was the last one off the plane. Mark Hunter, who's got the Sales Hunter podcast. Those are some of my really close friends, and we have conversations on a regular basis, and it's just such a neat place to be around like-minded people like that.
Well, you are attracting those people into your life, obviously, and however, with the intention of working with those people. I think that you um haven't you have naturally tapped into something in your management style, right? Because I did overhear a conversation that you were having with another guest at the event the last week, and I heard the person you were speaking to say something like that he had learned really quickly that moving from sales, being good at sales, to management and or leadership is not anything like he thought it was going to be. And you also said that one of the things that you have worked on and done intentionally as well is getting folks who maybe not comfortable or familiar with conversations and with C-suite level management, and bringing people into that conversation. So I'm throwing these two different things at you because I feel like they're related in terms of your love of people and wanting to bring them to a place where they want to find their own passions and their own uh, goals towards growth. That's that you're right. That is very different than saying I think I can put 10 salespeople together and make $1 million. That you did that effectively, have done that over and over effectively, but that's not actually the goal when you start with your people, it sounds like.
Well, we all have to drive numbers. You know, I was just listening to a podcast with a guy named Eddie Wilson. He's a pretty amazing entrepreneur that's sold all these companies. And yeah, his mindset, uh, what he said the other day was 85% of what we have to do in life has to do with business as well, has to do with passion and purpose. Having a purpose and a goal that that's, comes from inside out, because I'm an inside out, person. The other 15% is systems.
Mm.
Where a lot of people miss it is that they've got the passion and the purpose, but they don't have the system to go with it. And what we were able to do was we got the passion and the purpose, and because we did that, and we did some really cool, really neat stuff together. We would, we would, we became the leaders within our industry. Um, and when supply chain, I brought supply chain people in, and I would get set up with boards, and we would talk about what was going on in supply chain, say nothing about other than, hey, it's Hugh Hornsby from Everflow with such and such from Everflow. But we became the thought leaders of the industry to help the industry through those crises. And I tried to teach my team to do the same thing on a smaller level. But at the end of the day, it is about the numbers. It's always going to be that in order to have success, you have to be able to drive revenue. But most people, to get to what I think you're asking, is that most people that get into come from sales into management, a lot of those people are like lone wolves. They're really high performer type people. So, okay, you perform to that level, we're going to put you in. They don't know how to, they don't know how to put together teams, because it's a different mindset that now all of a sudden it's not about you. It's not about, you being the top salesperson at the end of the day. It's about you bringing the whole team together and having the team to mesh. And what I see, and I see it way too often, is I'll see somebody come in as a top performer, and then they go in and they'll go travel with their salespeople, and then guess who takes the credit?
Uh,
Them. And I did just the opposite. I I I'd travel with them. I'd set them up and say, okay, now it's on you guys. Now you have to take it from here. Um, and then the order would come in, and they'd call, well, who did this? You or them? It's like
mm,
they did it.
mm,
Now, if they got to the point that I was doing it all the time, then that's not the way it works. My biggest thing is that if we're going to build people, if we're going to build companies, we've got to make those people, you know, figure out where they are. The other hard
mm,
thing with it, and I love the question, because I just did another podcast from a guy, and I'm always saying I care and I love them, and people look at me like I'm nuts, but I really care and I really do love them. And he said, well, then if you care and love for them, how is it that how are you put in a position to let them go? I said,
mm,
because if you really care for your kids and you love your kids, you coach them up, and you help them out. And in this case, you coach them up or you coach them out. You just say, this is not right for you. Let's move you on. And it took me a long time to kind of realize that. But and the other thing is that I do keynotes, and I remember a couple of years ago, this woman, and we were doing a workshop, and she said, I love everything you're saying, but this is just not the role. This is not where I want to be. And I'm like, first of all,
mm,
we start from where we stand. Now, if there's something going on within your company that's dishonest, and there's something that you can't put up with, you have to lean on your core values. But the bottom line is that usually the issue has to do within ourselves. And so, and I said, start from where you're sitting right now. We have the ability to open a door for a person every time we walk into the grocery store. Um,
mm,
and not open it and think that they're going to say thank you, but open it because it's the right thing to do, or just being kind to somebody. Um, we have that ability to do all of that. Earl Nightingale, which was a mentor of mine many, many years ago, he's got his whole thing about, I'm always, my thing is gratitude is attitude. If you're
mhm,
grateful for somebody, that creates your attitude. It's impossible to be um, to show, if you're showing gratitude, it's impossible to be negative. if you're looking at the world from a place of gratitude, and um, it's impossible to do both. But what happens is that a lot of people get caught up, and this is the mindset portion of it, and they go through all the negatives. And if you can't get rid of the negative, it's going to turn into another negative.
Yeah.
You have, and I had to do that. I had to. I was abused. I was abused at the age of 8, that I never shared with anybody until the age of 60. And it was, I say, what gets impressed gets expressed. And I was great at hiding it. And then one day I realized that I couldn't hide it. I had to let it go. That day was the day that I got a phone call from my mom, or from my mom was in hospice. They asked me to come over and pick up her stuff. And she had carried her pain with her mother till, the nurse said, well, can I tell you a story? And I said, sure. And she said, your mother got up, walked to the end of the bed, and was talking to somebody. And I walked in, I said, Mary Ellen, who are you talking to? And she said, it was my mother. I forgave her. She went and laid down, closed her eyes, and she died with a smile on her face. She had forgiven her mother. And I realized at that time that I had stuff that I had carried that I'd never shared with anybody else, that was the gift that she was giving me. And I went back, and that night I told my wife about how I was abused at the age of 8, that I'd hidden it the entire time. Um, that was a monumental moment for me, because I had forgiven that guy, I don't know how many times. Um, he was a teenage kid. And it's not easy to do. But shortly after that, I live in Eastern Virginia now. I went back to that same place that he had abused me, and I just forgave him.
Wow.
I forgave him with tears in my eyes, and I forgave him once and for all. And I carry him with me, I carry him with me on my shoulder. Most people don't know, but when things get hard, that's who goes in with me. And I'm always saying, Randy, we're going in together now. And so I use that as a positive. But when I went through cancer, it made me realize it even more, because uh, you start to think about all the negative stuff, and I had to start turning that into positives. I try to teach people that, and I try to teach teams that, um, and so yeah, my management style is a little bit different.
Well, you have you have shared with me that you're developing a program around mindset. So I think now is a good time to see if I can get you to tell me the birth of that and what that looks like.
Well, it's a mastermind. It's a couple of masterminds. I see a gap in the world out there. There's not too many coaches like me. But it's a mastermind that I'm going to be doing for like lower level people kind of coming through, and a mastermind for like CEOs and people transitioning out of the corporate world. Um,
Oh.
the program I have is a 6-month program that we put people through. I have broken down everything that I've done, and then I've gone back in and I've taken a look at a lot of the Think and Grow Rich stuff, and we've incorporated that into that. But we've got the 6-month program goes on where we help people write out their life script, figure out their goals. Most people don't know what they want, Elizabeth, and most people really don't know what they want. And then we take it through. We realize that there's only 2 ways to learn. Um, it's a 9/11 moment, something that happens that is a crisis, or through repetition. Um, and so what we've learned is we take you through people through 6 months, and we have videos that we show them on a daily basis. They get 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at night. you do your journal, you try to do your journal in the morning, and then we have a workbook that we have you work on at in the in the weekends. And then the other thing that we do is that we do a group coach. I do a group coaching session for everybody, and the whole idea is to get people to start thinking differently and putting like-minded people around around that. And then I speak. I'm passionate. Um, I'm a passionate speaker. I love speaking on not only mindset, but getting people to start thinking about where they are and figuring out where they want to go. But I also do um, team coaching for corporations um, with that as well. I'm very sales oriented. Every I've turned all these around with sales because I realize that driving sales dollars is the most important thing that we can do. Um, but then I'm very people oriented. I like to get involved with each person and help them build their goals out. So, um, but I've got that program that I'm putting together, and then I'm doing some work. I'll be doing some workshops based around all of this, you know, to get started. So, I'm doing the same thing that a lot of people do when uh, you come through corporations and you start to make a transition. I just think there's something bigger out there for me. So, and I was just named Person of the Year for my industry.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So, okay. So I know that it's hard sometimes to talk about yourself when you've been given an award. And I tried to ask you, what does that mean? I'm slightly familiar with your industry because I have a family member who has been in the plumbing corporate world for a while. But what is the award you won?
Well, it's the Wholesaler Magazine, and it's for the plumbing, HVAC, and industrial industry for wholesalers. Um, and they called me a couple months, or they sent me an email, called me a couple months ago, and I flew into Chicago, and they named me Person of the Year, which rarely does that happen for somebody. It's usually for bigger companies that are out there, but my it happened because of my team,
Mm-hmm.
because of the industry. Um, I really um, was able to impact the life of a lot of my team members. We've had tremendous. We took a brand that was not really a brand and turned it into a brand, and then because of what I give back to the industry, I'm always giving back. I believe that when we make a commitment to the industries that are most important to us, then we have to give back to them, um, and give back in a way that you're not looking for the recognition. I never expected this recognition. This was a pretty big deal, um, and it came right after I just finished 28 radiation sessions. So it was pretty emotional. It was a pretty emotional time for me, and that's how I ended up on stage in Philadelphia with this guy named Clayton uh,
Yeah.
Fletcher, which has become a good friend of mine, and we're thinking about doing some stuff together. But that's how I ended up with that. So I'm convinced that what we give, we do get back. It's just not always the way that we think that we're going to get it. And the other thing is that I think gratitude is one of the most important things that we can share with everybody. Um, and your attitude towards the people that you're dealing with. If we treat each person, and I try this as much as I can, but if we can get everybody to treat the person in front of them as the most important person that they really are, what happens, um, whether it's business, whether it's life, whether it's your personal life, what happens is just amazing. When I said that um, when I said that I gravitated to just incredible friends, and my good friend Don Green is going to be putting a quote in the magazine. He's 82 years old. Uh, he helped change my life when I I had lost my number two in charge, went into the hospital and didn't come back out. And I met with Don. He'd read an article that I'd written. And he spent 4 hours with me, which I didn't really expect. And we just became friends. Um, you know, my biggest thing is that I've learned is that don't do it on your own. Yeah, you don't have to have a bunch of partners, but what you do want to do is to find those people that can help you become the person that you want to be. Um, if there's anything I could say to your listeners is that um, there's too many people that get caught up in failing and then thinking that, hey, it's because of me, but they don't have the support network to you know to go to. Find those support networks. I mean, the stuff that you do, Elizabeth, is just amazing because you don't even realize it how good you are, uh, but you're creating a support network for people. Is basically what you're doing. Um, when I take a look at companies, um, companies fail because they don't know how to build communities. I don't know how many companies you've worked for, but I've worked for a few. And a lot of times it's the CEO or the person at the top that doesn't get it because they think that, it all has to be done a certain way. What we're doing, what we're all doing out there is we're building a community. And there's a lot of lonely people out there that don't have a community to go to. And
Yeah.
I guess if we were talking about my business, that's what I'm doing is I'm building a community. Now, it's going to be a community of specific type people. But what you're doing and with the stuff that you're doing, I just cannot begin to tell you how much I appreciate you and what you're doing because you're building a community and something somewhere sparked you to make a decision to do that.
Thank you so much for joining me today. My name's Elizabeth in Floyd, Virginia. This has been an episode of Dear Business Coach.